How many times have you laid your head on the pillow and felt your heart racing for no apparent reason? That restlessness that no one sees, but that steals your sleep, your peace, and even your joy in life? Many people call this normal, but I want to show you that it's not. There's a dangerous sign of anxiety that almost no one notices, and ignoring it can cost you much more than you think. What no one told you is that the Bible speaks to this. It not only acknowledges anxiety, but reveals the path to overcoming it before it becomes a prison. The truth is God never intended for you to live on autopilot, dominated by fear. He promised something greater, a life of courage, rest, and purpose. So if this message has touched your heart, I urge you, follow this channel. It's not just for me, it's because every click you make helps this message reach more people who are currently trapped in cycles of fear and anxiety. People who need this liberation as much as you do right now. Some people think that anxiety is just about racing against the clock with no time for anything, but the most dangerous sign of anxiety isn't physical fatigue. It's the moment when the person starts to think that feeling afraid all the time is normal. This is the point at which the mind becomes accustomed to the prison and begins to call routine what is in fact a silent spiritual battle. The heart races, the thoughts don't stop, the chest tightens. And yet the person says it's just adulthood. Everyone lives like this. This is a mistake. Because anxiety doesn't warn you by coming in screaming, it infiltrates silently until it convinces you that nothing is wrong. And that's precisely where the danger lies, when the enemy manages to disguise slavery as normality. The Bible already warned that the enemy disguises himself as an angel of light. He doesn't arrive announcing destruction. He presents himself as something common, acceptable. This is the most dangerous sign of anxiety, when it goes unnoticed and fear stops being an intruder and becomes a guest. But if this is the beginning, what happens next? Elijah was a courageous prophet, but at a certain point in his journey, fear overcame him. After facing great battles, he found himself fleeing into the desert, believing he was alone. Anxiety made him forget who he was and who was beside him. He even asked to die, believing the burden was unbearable. Do you see how this happens to us too? You may have already overcome enormous battles, but all it takes is a whiff of threat, and suddenly everything seems meaningless. Fear sets in and tells you the only way out is to give up. This is the same sign as Elijah, when the heart accepts that living tired and anxious is the norm, and doesn't realize it's being deceived. But God didn't leave Elisha alone. He sent an angel, gave him food, rest, and renewed his strength. This shows that even the chosen can fall into the trap of anxiety, but it also shows that God's help never fails. And if Elijah was only able to rise because he was awakened by divine intervention, what are we still ignoring in our own lives? The heart is treacherous when you get used to the weight. It creates excuses to justify anxiety. It's just a phase. It's because work demands too much. Everyone lives like this. Little by little, what should be treated as an enemy becomes accepted as part of life. Fear ceases to be the exception and becomes the rule. This is the great danger when the mind adapts to chaos. You wake up tired, go to sleep worried, always with a tight chest, and yet you think you're just living life. The deception lies there. Anxiety has already taken over. But because it came disguised as routine, you didn't even notice. It's like carrying invisible chains. The Bible says in Proverbs that there is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. Anxiety creates exactly this, seemingly normal paths that lead to spiritual exhaustion. And when the heart accepts this lie as truth, what will be the next step it will push us to take? There was a young man who lived full of dreams, but anxiety began to show small signs. First, there were sleepless nights. Then his heart raced in simple situations. He told himself it was normal, that it would soon pass. But time passed, and each ignored sign became a greater burden. He began to isolate himself. He no longer wanted to be with his friends, nor did he take pleasure in things that once brought joy to his heart. Fear became routine, fear of going out, fear of trying, fear of failing. Before he knew it, he no longer had peace, only an emptiness that consumed him every day. The anxiety that had seemed small had taken over everything. This is the portrait of many living today. They ignore the first signs and only wake up when they've already lost their peace. The Bible warns us to be vigilant because the enemy prowls around, seeking whom he may devour. And if anxiety is one of his means, how far can you go if you continue to ignore these signs? There's a huge difference between being on alert and living in confidence. Those who live on alert are always expecting the worst. Every noise becomes a threat. Every thought becomes a worry. It's as if they're constantly on guard but never rest. The body never relaxes. The mind never rests. It's a state of constant war. Living in trust, however, is different. It's not denying that struggles exist, but it's knowing who you trust during them. It's waking up and saying, I don't know what's going to happen today, but I know who's with me. This changes everything, because the heart stops being driven by fear and starts being sustained by faith. Anxiety fades when trust enters the scene. The Bible teaches, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. When you understand this, you realize that living on alert is a human burden, but living in trust is divine rest. The question is, which of these two ways have you been living lately? Jesus said, I have come that they may have life and have it more abundantly. But many are just surviving. They wake up, work, sleep, repeating the cycle, but without peace. Anxiety pushes them into survival mode, where the goal is just to get from one day to the next, carrying fear in their hearts. To survive is to be always tired without true joy. It's to take a deep breath and say one more day without realizing that this is not God's plan. The biblical advice is clear. Cast all our anxieties upon Him. This isn't poetry. It's a practical commandment. When we surrender, we cease to live in a state of war and begin to experience rest. Those who follow this advice discover that abundant life depends not on the absence of problems, but on the presence of God. This is where the difference happens. Anxiety loses control and the heart learns to live lightly. But if this abundance is already available, why do so many still insist on living like survivors? Anxiety doesn't arrive suddenly like a storm. It begins in small drops, a worry that won't go away, a thought that won't go away, a constant feeling of tightness. Therefore, it's necessary to develop daily practices that act as watchdogs, capable of detecting these signs before they overwhelm the heart. One such practice is sincere prayer first thing in the morning, not as an obligation, but as an intimate conversation with God. Another is gratitude, writing down at least 3 reasons to be thankful every day. This trains the mind to see light where fear insists on casting a shadow. It's also essential to pause, take a deep breath, and remember that you don't have to carry the world alone. These habits seem simple, but they're like small stones that ward off the giant of anxiety before it grows. The Bible teaches, let each one examine himself. This daily self-analysis is key. But if it's so simple, why don't most people manage to make it a consistent practice? Anxiety attacks like an invisible enemy. We don't see where it comes from, but we feel its effects on our body and mind. This is precisely why the Bible speaks of the need to wear spiritual armor, because we are not just fighting against human worries, but against forces that want to steal our peace and fill our hearts with fear. The helmet of salvation protects the mind from thoughts of defeat. The shield of faith extinguishes the flaming arrows of doubt and insecurity. The breastplate of righteousness guards the heart from feelings that try to suffocate us. Each piece of armor is not theory, but practice. Prayer, faith, obedience, trust. It is what keeps us standing when anxiety tries to bring us down. Without this armor, any small problem becomes a giant. But with it, even the biggest fears can be faced with determination. The question is, how often have you left the house without this protection? And if anxiety insists on attacking you every day, isn't it time to decide to constantly don this armor? Fear always knocks on the door. The difference lies in what you do when it appears. Many let fear enter, settle in, and become master of the house. Others have learned to use fear as a reminder. Every time it arises, it's time to pray. It's as if every anxiety is an invitation to bend your knees and speak to God. This practice completely changes the dynamics of the mind, because instead of letting your heart race on its own, you interrupt the cycle at the exact moment it begins. Fear ceases to be an enemy and becomes a warning sign. Hey, it's time to seek refuge in God now. This immediate response breaks the grip of anxiety before it can escalate. The Bible promises, do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and petition, present your requests to God. This isn't a distant theory, it's practical action for everyday life. But are we truly using every moment of fear as an opportunity for prayer, or are we still letting it control us? Ultimately, anxiety always tries to steal the same thing: peace. Without peace, the heart is lost, the mind restless, and life becomes nothing more than survival. But the Bible offers a promise that goes beyond any human logic, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. This peace doesn't come from having money to spare, from solving all our problems, or from never facing difficulties. It comes from within, from the Spirit that reminds us we are not alone. It's the peace that keeps the heart steadfast even in the midst of the storm. that gives rest amid the noise, that protects the mind when everything around us seems to be falling apart. Anxiety may knock at your door, but it doesn't have to dwell within you anymore. The promise is clear. God's peace can completely guard your life. But to do so, you must decide to surrender your signs, fears, and anxiety into His hands. After all, if peace has already been promised, what's still stopping you from receiving it today? Anxiety tries to convince you there's no way out, but today you saw that even the greatest men of faith have faced this enemy and won, not because they were strong, but because they decided to surrender their fear to God. The most dangerous sign isn't feeling anxiety, but accepting it as normal. Now the choice is before you. Continue living as a survivor or decide to experience the abundant life Jesus promised. What will you do when the first signs appear? Will you let them dominate your mind, or will you transform every fear into immediate prayer? I want to encourage you to apply what you've learned today. Don't expect fear to go away on its own. Use it as a reminder that it's time to seek God. And if this message resonated with you, follow the channel and turn on notifications, because here each video is another step in your journey to freedom from the cycle of fear and anxiety.